protest.
Peaceful protesters.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest. Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest. Peaceful protest.
Good evening. I'm Robert Cressionnie, and you've joined us for America in Danger, and
I'm John Gatsis, joining Robert,
my co-host. Today is May 29th, 2021, and today in history marks the anniversary of the day that Jews in Paris were forced to sew a yellow star on their coats. Now, this was the advice of Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. So Adolf Hitler ordered all Jews in occupied Paris, because the Germans had occupied Paris, he ordered them to wear identifying yellow stars on the left side of their coats. Joseph Goebbels made it a priority to exterminate Jews. So, you know, we need to think about these kind of things.
I agree. I think there's a number of discussion topics that spin off of that. First one that comes to mind for me is the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in 1943, which was when Jews who had been herded into a ghetto in Warsaw as part of the final solution of extermination were able to push back significantly against Germans. How did they do that? They smuggled a very small quantity of small arms into their possession and used those small arms, i.e. guns, okay, to push back very hard, and they held the Nazis at bay for quite a while. In fact, I think I'm speaking off the cuff here, but wasn't there a movie with Adrian Brody called The Pianist?
I believe there was.
Isn't the backdrop of that the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising?
Pretty sure it is.
Well, to me, that's a very instructional point in history, and one of the things that's always puzzled me in particular, you know, because one of the things we are seeing right now, concurrent, and it's topical as well with the discussions, is the rise of anti-Semitism in this country.
Absolutely.
And that seems to be more driven by the increasing dominance of Islamic fascism and Islamic extremism within the Democrat Party. But that's the locus of the anti-Semitism that we're observing right now in our society. Of course, they find fast ally with the Nazi thinking and thought process.
Absolutely.
Several comments made in praise of Hitler recently. But for the life of me, I do not understand why American Jews support the left historically.
I do not know.
To not learn the lessons of being disarmed at the hands of a tyrannical government, you know, in the form of,
well, you know, something you just mentioned that kind of clicked. The Islamic fascism that's being demonstrated and ultimately pushed by several members of Congress.
Right, the squad.
The squad, primarily.
Yeah.
You know, that all meshes in very well with this critical race theory that's being taught.
Right.
Because in that, it divides society into basically two categories.
Right.
You are either an oppressed victim, or you are the oppressor.
Right. By virtue of your birth.
By virtue of your birth. No other characteristics other than virtue of your birth.
Correct.
And the interesting thing about it in critical race theory, because it stems from a Marxist basis.
Correct.
The precursor to that was critical law theory, which looked at law and said that, well, law shouldn't be applied equally. It should be applied with
differentially based on these historical oppression paradigms.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
But in this critical race theory, it forces the victim to then become the oppressor.
Right.
Because there is no effort to eliminate oppression or eliminate discrimination or eliminate any kind of mistreatment of demographics of the population. So it's actually creating oppressors.
It is. It's becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It absolutely is.
And that's its purpose.
That's exactly its purpose.
Design.
That's exactly its purpose. Regardless of what they teach in the educational institutions, that is the purpose of critical race theory.
Right, and
bottom line.
And completely ignored by the discussion is the fact that this society, whatever its flaws and whatever its historical transgressions, has always emphasized the primacy of the individual.
Absolutely.
As enshrined in the Constitution of the United States.
Yep.
And what is, I said this on the show last time, but what is the greatest, most extreme example of a minority is the individual.
The individual,
and
exactly.
I think if people can't seize upon that and recognize what is under assault with all this, this really unhinged critical race theory and other Marxist ideologies it's dominating the public school system now. And I think some people are beginning to wake up to it.
It is. In fact, I saw a video tonight just before showtime, and I hate I couldn't grab it. But it was a Zoom conference call with Portland teachers.
Oh, yeah, I think I caught a bit of that.
And in that, one teacher says, well, you know what? If you can't embrace this critical race theory, then you will be erased.
Right.
And of course, she went on with some other discussion, but that was the gist of it, that if you don't embrace this new critical race theory,
maybe they'll make you wear some kind of yellow star.
Well, that's the danger,
Right.
you know, and all of these things go so greatly against what this nation has stood for over the years. And, you know, this is Memorial Day weekend.
Yep. Yes, it is.
And we need to remember the fallen, because they fought regardless of the political implications of these conflicts that we've been in. Young men and women went off to war to fight for liberty and the republic.
Well, it was more of a sense of, you know, the divisions within a family. Brothers and sisters and siblings will fight, but in the end, they unite.
That's exactly right.
For their common purpose.
Fight for their common purpose.
And until very recently, we did share that as a nation, but that's being, that's under assault right now.
That is.
And we're kind of, I think, stretching at the seams here a little bit.
I think so. It's quickly being ground into dust under the boot heel of fascism and oppression.
That's right.
At the hands of people who claim to be victims, and yet they want to.
And let's just say it, communism.
And communism,
I mean,
absolutely.
you know, I think I didn't have a chance to peruse the article, but I saw a recent byline about the 45 goals that the Communist Party had for the United States back in 1948, and how many of them have been achieved. And it's a shocking number that have been achieved.
It is.
The vast majority.
It is. I've seen that, and it is shocking. So,
right.
Well, this being Memorial Day, I've got a little video that I'd like to run in remembrance of all who have given their all for this nation. And these are individuals that we need to remember and what they fought for and died for. So Lee, if you'll cue up that video. We're back, and as I said earlier, it is Memorial Day,
Yeah,
so
that was nice. That was a nice video.
remember the fallen. Thanks.
Having grown up in a military family, I particularly appreciate that, as you did.
Yeah, as both of us did.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Your father was Army, mine was Marines. So,
Right.
Well, you know, we see a lot going on right now. You know, President Trump tried to build a pipeline, build a wall,
Right.
you know, put America on a priority.
Right.
For Americans.
Energy independence, which is huge.
Energy independence.
Yeah.
Well, what we've seen is that instead of trying to follow that path, our President Biden has shut down a pipeline. He's issued edicts that we should immediately change over to non-fossil fuels,
Right.
to
So-called
green
renewables
energy, renewables,
right.
yeah. And funny thing about it, though, he's helping Vladimir Putin build a pipeline.
Yeah, it's very difficult to fathom this, and you know, I mean, I'm an Occam's razor guy, which Occam's razor says that in the absence of any other explanation, the simplest explanation is probably the best for a set of circumstances. These actions can only be explained to me by somebody who's purposely trying to diminish the capability and status of the United States. First of all, one of the elements of that Russian pipeline, if you remember, my facts may be a little off because I'm just calling it from memory, but at the time that Trump was pushing back against that pipeline from Russia to Germany, you know, he was pushing Germany to pay their fair share and some of the other NATO members to pay their fair share into their NATO obligation. They don't pay their bill. We do. We were
Right.
basically covering their costs. And Angela Merkel was working a deal with Russia to get a pipeline which would get them cheap energy, okay, limit our ability to export our petroleum product to those countries, okay, and yet she wouldn't pay her bill to NATO. So
Right.
Trump very aggressively pushed back on that, and I didn't hear anybody really object to that on its face. They just said, well, he's angering our allies, and he's so bombastic, and he's so,
Right.
you know, all the usual criticisms because of his apparent, you know, lack of style and finesse. But frankly, those were very good moves. Germany did up their payment,
Right.
began paying their bill, and that pipeline got quashed. And in concert with that, our energy independence was established, okay? And they've completely undone all of that. Every bit of what I just
Absolutely.
described has been undone. That can only be for the reason of diminishing this country's capability to be independent on the world stage, and I think these people are operating to a completely different agenda, the people in charge right now.
I agree, and it is for that one sole reason, to diminish the capability of the United States.
Please, somebody call in and explain to me rationally. There's the number at the bottom of the screen. Please call and tell me why my interpretation of these events is incorrect. Please. This is me begging. Please, you know, do that.
And while you can formulate your strategy to debate that issue, we're going to take a little commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to continue talking about some of the things that are being done to harm this nation. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is John Woodruff with Premier Equipment Company of Rocky Mountain Infield. Been shopping for a zero-turn mower lately. You've probably noticed that inventory is getting hard to come by. So come on down and see what we've got. We've got a showroom full. We have a showroom full of Exmark and Grasshopper zero-turn mowers. Everything from commercial to residential, everything in between. We've got a good relationship with our distributors. They tell us when we sell these, they've got more on the way. If you've been in the market for a zero-turn mower, come see me, John Woodruff from Premier Equipment.
Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we're back for more America in Danger, and I just want to give a shout out to my mother and sister and her husband down in Metairie, Louisiana, watching on the internet. So, hey, you know, we were talking about that pipeline and Biden's push to green energy.
Yeah.
And I just want to give you a little contrast here of something that is part of the whole green energy. You know, the green energy thing is based on a lot of solar, a lot of wind, a lot of battery.
And a lot of fiction.
A lot of fiction, too. One fiction is that green energy is so much cleaner than fossil fuels, because if Lee, if you'll switch over to the HDMI feed, I want to show you what a lithium mine looks like. All right,
that's picturesque.
That's a lithium mine. Now, in mining lithium, it's not just digging it out of the ground. They use all kind of nasty chemicals and toxic substances. So what you end up with is basically scorched earth.
Right.
Once that's done, that area will never, ever be productive.
Right.
That area will likely never be usable.
Right.
You know? But on the other hand, a pipeline for pushing fossil fuel, I also have a picture of a finished pipeline. So Lee, if you'll switch over to this one. All right, that's a finished pipeline.
One might want to go hiking there.
Well, you know, there are all kinds of things that I can see right off the bat. First of all, you've got some grazing land for wild animals. You've got hunting ground. I mean, I hunted on pipelines when I was a kid. Pipelines and power lines I hunted on when I was a kid.
Sure.
So you've got a clear-cut path through the woods. That in and of itself is not detrimental to the economy, to the environment.
Well, part of what you're describing here is that they're basically just offloading the pollution from one location to another.
Yeah.
But worse than that, when you really do the energy math, and energy is a quantifiable substance just like anything else, and that's a subject for a whole different show, but these green energy concepts, they're not ready for prime time, as the old saying goes. Now, I'm all for, you know, electric cars. I really do. I love that technology. I think it's fascinating. I think the batteries have a long way to go, but apparently we're on the verge of seeing some changes there. But ultimately, if you monitor what the left does with respect to energy, they exhibit a very simple relationship. If it works, they don't like it.
Right.
Okay. The minute private enterprise, for example, if they were to come up with a viable battery that could get your car 1,200 miles on a charge, suddenly they'd be showing your lithium mine slides and whining and moaning about that. They want to inhibit the ability of individuals to live the lifestyle we live and have the autonomy we have, which is born out of cheap, readily available energy. That is the cornerstone of our technological success and our productivity in this country, and they're trying to choke that off. Why do you think they don't like nuclear energy? It is abundant, very safe. France powers most of its grid off of it. It's completely carbon-free if you accept the premise that carbon emissions are destroying the planet, which I do not. But if you do, nuclear energy is a perfectly viable solution to that problem. And yet, no interest in nuclear.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So again, that supports my thesis. They don't like it if it works. If the windmills actually work, we'd be hearing about the birds that get slaughtered and killed.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. You know, the nations that depend most heavily on wind power, they also have the highest utility rates in the world.
That's right. Oh, Germany has made that move, in fact.
Yeah.
But they still want that pipeline with that cheap fuel coming from
Right.
Russia.
Oh, yeah,
Which makes
absolutely.
Russia strong. Oh, and just to divert back to that for a second, the other thing about that is, what is the purpose of NATO but to protect NATO countries from Russia?
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we're going to make Russia stronger with this pipeline, but we're going to pay the bill for NATO and go to their defense. I mean, you couldn't. It's Machiavellian. You couldn't.
Well,
Machiavellian.
it is.
You could not come up with a
Yeah.
more grander scam that they're pulling on this country.
Yeah, and you know, the whole thing about NATO, when Trump pushed back on the NATO allies,
Yeah.
he pushed back because they weren't paying their fair share, which the left absolutely loves in this
That's
country.
right.
They love talking about paying your fair
That's
share.
right.
Well, the NATO countries weren't paying their fair share. So like the United Nations,
And it wasn't
like
even-
the WHO, like NATO, we pay the
That's
brunt.
right. And it wasn't even their fair share. It was just their share. They were agreed
Exactly.
upon amount. I
Exactly.
mean, the analogy to the tax thing would be cheating on your taxes. They were cheating on
They
their payment. You know, the fair share mantra that comes from the left with respect to taxes ignores the fact that the top 1% pay 50% of the income tax.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And if you think that the promises that they're making right now about this tax package, about taxing only millionaires and people making over
Right.
400,000, well, let me tell you something. It never works like that. You're being taxed right now by the policies they're implementing through the mechanism of inflation.
Inflation vis-a-vis the Federal Reserve, quantitative easing,
There you
and
go.
pumping of money, and they're going to spend $6 trillion.
Yeah.
That's the proposal. That's the proposal that they've got. I think that's not going to quite make it. I'm certainly not.
I hope not. There are some Democrats who are waffling right now because it's just so horrendous that you can't be illogical enough to rationalize the whole process that they're trying to push
Right.
through.
Well, anyway, I didn't mean to divert the whole direction there, but I thought it bared
Well, you know,
pointing out.
you mentioned the Fed brought to mind Janet Yellen. Now she's not chair of the Fed anymore. She's
No,
Treasury Secretary.
that's right.
But what she's proposing is a global minimum corporate tax
Right.
structure where
Right.
every nation of the world has the same corporate tax rate.
Right.
She says, well, this will prevent manufacturers from relocating.
Yeah, and it'll line the pockets of global taxing authorities
There you
with
go.
the productive output of their respective countries.
There you go.
What right do they have to
Plus-
even do that?
Well, they don't. They have no right to
Right.
do that. And another aspect of that is the fact that if you have static manufacturing around the world,
Right.
corporations never moving, never relocating,
Right.
never trying to get the most bang for their buck, then what you've done, you've eliminated one factor there, and you've ratcheted up one notch toward global governance.
Right.
Because
right.
you establish equality among corporations, and soon we have a rollerball type situation, for lack of a better analogy there.
Well, and actually, that's you mentioned that's actually one of my favorite movies, the original, the one from
Right, the original,
1973
yeah.
with John Houseman, who's the quintessential sort of corporate government fascist insider type.
Yep.
But that is I don't think that movie understood its own prophecy.
No, I don't
I
either.
think that movie thought they were railing against corporatism,
Mm-hmm.
and really what they were railing against was corporate fascism and authoritarianism, which is exactly what we have today. That's what communism is, and that's what fascism is.
That's exactly
And
right.
I encourage people to, that's out of the blue that you mentioned that movie, but they should go watch the original
Yeah.
Rollerball with James Caan. It holds up pretty well, even though it's a 1973 movie. It's on my top 10 favorite, list of favorite movies.
Yeah, it is.
There's a remake they did, which is
I know.
lousy.
I
Yeah.
saw the remake.
Yeah,
Yeah,
awful,
it was
horrible.
it was a little. Yeah, it had a little more woke
Well, and it was just
theme to it.
it
Yeah,
was dreadful in every way.
it was. But all of these policies that we talk about, the Democrats are implementing, and this is not just on a national level. This is on state levels and local levels.
Yeah.
Well, what they've done, and just to clearly demonstrate mathematically, which is pretty definitive here.
Well, not if you listen to.
I know,
I'll just let you carry on. right.
But the Democrats have essentially created an exodus from some of these blue states.
Oh, well, that's right.
It just I wanted to mention that. It is the states that are losing population are
Yeah, if you look at a net migration
California, New
Yeah.
York, New Jersey, Michigan, Illinois, lost a combined 4 million.
Right.
That's 4 million residents. have left those states.
And that was in the news indirectly if you were paying attention to the results of the census recently,
Yes.
which had North Carolina picking up congressional representation.
Texas picked up a seat or two.
Right. I think, I don't know who else picked up, but I do know who lost. New York lost. California lost representation in Congress for the first time in its history as a member of the Union. To me, that's significant.
That is very significant.
Right. Productive populations are fleeing those states.
They are.
And that will leave them, you know, if you want to know what's going to happen, look at what happened to Detroit. Detroit is a perfect microcosm of what's happening to these big blue states in general. They were the jewel of the industrial Midwest in the mid-50s. They instituted all kinds of welfare state policies and all kinds of other unionized nonsense. Ultimately, competition and bad domestic policy drove our automobile industry into the tank, and the result was a hollowed-out shell of a city. And everybody knows that Detroit is a certain kind of a hole that nobody wants to go to.
It's absolutely a cesspool.
That's right.
It really is. It's just a cesspool. And you're right. No one wants to go there.
Right.
No one wants to go there because of foolish policies that are being implemented, not because these individuals are uneducated or dumb or stupid or foolish. It's being done with a strategic pathway.
Well, that's right.
That they're following.
That's right.
And it's a pattern, and you can see that pattern plainly once you realize what that pattern is. It's like looking at the old Sunday paper in the comics. They used to have the stereoscopic image, and once you realized what it was, you could focus right on it.
Right. Well, or another analogy, and I like analogies, I think of models. We always talk about mathematical models. We're going to model the climate. We're going to model this financial process. Well, if you model what's going on and you're able to use that model to predict the next move, the model that makes the most sense to me is that these people are engineering the demise of the United States.
Yes.
I can predict what these people are going to say about any given issue based on that model. That's you know, you put the data in here, crank the handle, and what do you get out? And it's uniformly and consistently anti-American and against our individual interests as both as individual citizens and as a sovereign, independent, constitutionally governed country.
Yeah, and you know, I think we're going to jump ahead to a video that I want to show, because we see other nations, Russia, China, other nations, and they're trying to be strong nations, powerful nations. Some, you know, no doubt China and Russia are extremely corrupt. They can be nothing else. It's a communist regime running both of them. They're extremely corrupt. But I want to show you the Army recruiting ads.
Oh, I can't wait.
From Russia, from China, and then from the United States. We already saw the woke CIA recruiting ad.
Right. The gal with the generalized anxiety disorder, that inspires confidence.
It absolutely does, and that's exactly what you want to tell enemies who might be targeting members of an intelligence organization, because that's what they look for. They look for those weaknesses that they can exploit.
That's right.
A gambling weakness, fetishes, any kind of weakness that they can exploit. Well, we are going to take a little break right quick.
Up against a hard break, as they say.
Up against a hard break, yes. Actually, we are well into the hard break. But we'll be back in just a minute. So take a look at this, and when we come back, we're going to look at the differences between the Army recruiting in China, Russia, and the United States. So stay tuned. You're watching America in Danger.
Hey, this is John Woodruff of Premier Equipment Company of Rocky Mountain Infield. If you've been shopping for a zero-turn mower lately, you've probably noticed that inventory is getting hard to come by. So come on down and see what we've got. We've got a showroom full. We have a showroom full of Exmark and Grasshopper zero-turn mowers, everything from commercial to residential, everything in between. We've got a good relationship with our distributors. They tell us when we sell these, they've got more on the way. If you've been in the market for a zero-turn mower, come see me, John Woodruff, Premier Equipment.
Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we are back for more America in Danger, and we were talking about the intentional destruction of the United States.
Yeah.
The intentional effort to diminish our manufacturing capabilities, our our energy independence,
Right.
Our cohesiveness as a society,
Right.
our ability to defend this nation. And in that, you know, our soldiers, we expect them to go to war.
Right.
We expect them to do things that we shrink in horror.
Kill people and break things.
And yet, I want you to watch this, and the U.S. recruiting ad is the very last one, but I wanted to play the Russian and the Chinese so that you can contrast those three different mentalities. So Lee, if you'll run the Russia versus China versus U.S. Army recruiting ad.
Social media users have mocked the US Army new recruitment campaign, with some noting stark difference between it and advertisement for Russia and Chinese militaries.
Теперь важно то, кем ты будешь сегодня. Что ты знаешь о себе? На что ты способен? Вопросы могут остаться без ответов, но разве ты сможешь потом спокойно спать? Узнать себя, познать границы своих возможностей. К черту границы. Ты готов ломать себя до изнеможения. Каждый день здесь боль закаляет. Шрамы, повседневность. Это ты решил себе что-то доказать. Командир здесь только для того, чтобы ты мог увидеть в нем врага, потому что без врага нет боя, а без боя нет победы. Но на самом деле главный враг — это ты. Вчерашний ты. Твоя задача — выследить врага, догнать его, превзойти, стать лучше, чем он, и вернуться назад победителем. Потому что завтра первый день твоей новой жизни.
One user, ThoughtCrime, posted side-by-side comparison of US military, Russian military, and Chinese military ad, noting the stark comparison between the American recruitment efforts and to its adversaries.
This is the story of a soldier who operates your nation's Patriot missile defense systems. It begins in California, with a little girl raised by two moms. Although I had a fairly typical childhood, took ballet, played violin, I also marched for equality. I like to think I've been defending freedom from an early age. When I was 6 years old, one of my moms had an accident that left her paralyzed. Doctors said she might never walk again. But she tapped into my family's pride to get back on her feet, eventually standing at the altar to marry my other mom. With such powerful role models, I finished high school at the top of my class and then attended UC Davis, where I joined a sorority full of other strong women. But as graduation approached, I began feeling like I'd been handed so much in life, a sorority girl stereotype. Sure, I'd spent my life around inspiring women, but what had I really achieved on my own? One of my sorority sisters was studying abroad in Italy. Another was climbing Mount Everest. I needed my own adventures, my own challenge. And after meeting with an Army recruiter, I found it. A way to prove my inner strength and maybe shatter some stereotypes along the way. I'm U.S. Army Corporal Emma Malone Lord, and I answered my calling.
Okay.
I'm going home now.
My neck is a little bit sore from shaking my head
Yeah,
over that
I'm
one.
going.
I just,
I'm taking my bike. I'm going home now.
I just do not understand the rationale behind presenting our military in that fashion.
Yeah, I don't either.
You know, it used to be, I know my father was on recruiting duty in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and at the height of the Vietnam era. He wasn't looking for socially sensitive individuals to go to Vietnam. He was looking for men who could go over there and do what was asked of them by their country. Things that most people would never want to do.
Absolutely.
And yet we have these, and of course you saw the Russian and the Chinese version, and I apologize for the voiceover, the Chinese voiceover there. I grabbed that video, so I didn't put that together myself. I borrowed that video, and it comes from obviously Chinese, Asian individual. And I don't know what they were saying in the Russian and the Chinese ads.
I saw a translated version of the Russian ad, and it was just a high level of rules. Like, what are you going to be? The past doesn't matter. Essentially, it was saying the past doesn't matter. What you were in the past doesn't matter. What you do from this point going forward is what matters, and who you're going to be, yada yada. And that was the thrust of the recruitment pitch.
Yeah, and you know, our Army recruits with a, well, you know, we want socially sensitive individuals, and we want them to come have a little adventure,
well, first of all,
a cartoon adventure.
First of all, that recruit, that sergeant, she is of no value in a real battle situation. I'm sorry, that's just, you know, those facts are inescapable. I hate to, you know, in this day and age, we're not allowed to acknowledge biological realities, but they exist.
They do exist.
A platoon full of people like that will get crushed in 2 minutes.
Absolutely.
Okay, they have no fighting value whatsoever. And the people who are pushing this stuff clearly are looking to put us at a grave disadvantage with any potential enemies.
They absolutely are.
Face.
Absolutely are. You know, the Chinese ad shows soldiers actually fighting, running on the battlefield, explosions, being shot at, tanks, airplanes. You know, we're inviting people into an adventure club.
That's right.
To
a social
run
justice.
a technological system. Oh, I'm going to run a Patriot missile system. I'll never be shot at.
Right. That's one of the misnomers. Is that well, it's all push button, it's all electronic. That's nonsense.
That is nonsense.
At the end of the day, you still have to be able to carry a backpack and dig a trench hole, and
that's exactly right.
When all that technology fails, it still ends up being, you know, hand to hand and ground troops, and the people they're recruiting, really, none of them are up to it.
No, they are not. They are not. Can you see someone like that in the SEALs or in the Special Forces or even in the paratroopers?
No.
I just don't see it. But, you know, they're doing that, and then on a civilian level, they want to disarm everyone.
Right.
Because they don't trust us to have firearms. They say, oh, we shouldn't have lethal firearms.
Right.
Well, what other kind of firearm is there?
Well, I know. That's right. I mean, of course, the big push right now is the AR-15.
The AR-15.
And they say, well, it's a weapon of war, it's a lethal weapon. Well, it is. You know, and I have to say that the people on our side of this argument who say things like, well, you could kill people with anything.
Right.
Well, you could. You could also probably saw a 2x4 with a butter knife, but I prefer a circular saw powered by a high torque motor.
Exactly.
Okay, an AR-15 is an effective weapon.
That's exactly right.
And the Constitution gives the people of this country the right to own those effective weapons to counter the effective weapons that police and military possess.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, the function of that Second Amendment is to serve as a check against government usurpation of our rights and our sovereignty as individuals. And so, yes, the AR-15 is a weapon of war, and I have a right to own one as enshrined in the Second Amendment. And I do own one. I own several.
As do I.
Yeah.
As do I, and none of them have ever killed anyone.
That's right. That's right.
And in all likelihood, unless it comes down to a self-defense situation, none of them will ever.
And it bears
kill
repeating,
anyone.
you know, in terms of just the raw statistics, more people are killed by knives every year than
Well, that's
rifles
right.
of any kind. You know, these occasional mass shootings, you grab all the headlines.
Right.
And,
Well, it's like a plane
It's
crash.
like a plane crash. That's exactly right. You know, ignoring the thousands that died, you know, daily or at least monthly on America's highways. Much less dramatic and
Well, it is. You know,
headline grabbing.
2,600 people die every year in North Carolina, just in North Carolina on the
Right,
highways.
right.
2,600 people die.
Right.
You know, people don't understand the quantities of people that die. They don't know how
No,
many
we
people
don't-
die
well,
in
they
the
have
United States
well,
every year.
It's 7,000 roughly, I believe.
7,000
Right,
a day
for all
die
the-
in the United States every day,
Right,
day
every
in, day out.
Right, for all causes.
It ends up being 2.8 million people
Right.
a year
That's right.
die in the United
That's
States
right.
of various causes.
Right.
Many of them natural causes.
Sure, natural causes, accidents, you know, cancers, all the different things that unfortunately we as human beings have to acknowledge as part of our experience on this earth.
That's right. And you know, speaking of firearms, there is an organization, a government agency called the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some things going on right now. President Biden is wanting to appoint someone to head that organization. Now, you would typically want someone to head that organization who, first of all, believes in law, law and order,
Right.
who believes in the Constitution, because you do swear an oath to
Uphold
protect and defend
that's
the
right.
Constitution,
That's right.
and who believes in individual rights.
Yeah.
Well, he's wanting to appoint an individual who believes in
None of those things. That's right.
None of the above. If he were checking the boxes, he would check none of the above.
That's right.
And when we get back from this commercial break, we're going to talk about that individual one more time. So stay tuned for more America in Danger.
This is Nicholas Bellamy at Premier Equipment. I'm going to talk about the 4540 Mahindra. It's 38 horsepower, full cylinder engine. The weight of this tractor is 4,000 pounds. This tractor is perfect for bush hogging, distance, small garden, a hunting club tractor. Comes with a 7-year warranty, 2-year bumper to bumper, additional 5-year on the powertrain. You can have this tractor for $200 a month, and we have 20 of these tractors in stock. Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, attorney at law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we're back for More America in Danger, and we're in the last quarter of the show.
Okay.
But I did want to talk about the individual that Joe Biden has selected to head the BATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
Right, often just called ATF.
ATF for short, yes. That's typically what it's called. Now, this individual, his name is David Chipman. Now, he was a ATF special agent for 25 years, so he has experience in the agency. There's no doubt about that. But when he left the agency, he went to work as an anti-gun lobbyist for Gabrielle Gifford's anti-gun organization.
She was the one that was
shot
and mortally wounded in Arizona.
That is correct.
Right, by the mentally ill individual who
had a pistol.
Right,
correct.
right. There's no political motive there really at all.
No.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that I always say about individuals like that taking up a cause, well, one thing, they're not objective.
Right.
They're basing everything on their own situation.
That's right.
It's tragic. I won't deny it's tragic.
That's right.
You know, there's no doubt about it. But you can't put someone into one of those positions who can't make objective decisions.
That's right. That's right.
Because they're biased from the get-go.
That's right. In fact, I remember watching Dianne Feinstein. You know, she's a big anti-gunner. And she was droning on about how, very hysterically, I thought, that she had held somebody in her arms. I think it was, wasn't it the mayor of San Francisco who got shot, and she was present. And so my first thought was, well, that makes you supremely unqualified to judge on this issue, because you're judging it from a frankly hysterical and greatly biased and emotional perspective.
Exactly.
Anyway, I think that's what you're saying is exactly right.
Exactly. You know, during the confirmation hearings on Wednesday, Chipman confirmed his support for an AR ban, a ban on assault rifles. I'm sorry, not assault rifles. They are not assault rifles.
Right.
An assault rifle is something totally different.
Right.
AR does not stand for assault rifle.
Yes, Armalite rifle.
Write this down.
Yeah.
Stands for
Armalite rifle.
Armalite rifle.
Right.
The original ones were made by Armalite. That was a company. Later ones made by Colt and every little company under the sun.
I think even Mattel made some during the Vietnam War for a while.
So.
Yeah.
I think so. Well, Mr. Chipman does not believe that the Second Amendment grants us the right, or it doesn't grant us a right. It protects our right.
Right.
I keep slipping into these leftist
premises that they put forth, which that's right.
And that's why they put them out there,
correct.
so that they become common usage.
Right.
The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, doesn't grant a single right.
That's right.
It says government shall not infringe upon these rights.
Right.
Write that down if you need to.
Yeah.
Put it on your refrigerator.
Right. They're inherent.
Stick it on your refrigerator.
Right. They're baked into our existence.
They're inherent.
Yeah.
They're just part of the game. They are baked in the cake.
That's right.
They are granted by a much higher authority, a God in heaven, and no man is to rent those asunder.
That's right.
Now, Chipman, who, like Anthony Fauci, likes to mince words and dance around a little bit, equivocates.
Yeah.
And when asked about the ban, he wants a total ban.
Right.
He does not want just a partial ban. He wants a total ban of anything that takes a magazine.
A magazine, and it's a .22 caliber or over, which is basically every gun there is.
Yeah, and that's what Senator Cruz said to him. That's basically everything.
Well,
every modern hunting rifle.
You know, when pressed for a definition of an assault rifle, he couldn't give one. Yeah, he had no. That's because it's a nebulous term of.
Exactly.
It's analogous to the '70s Saturday Night Special, back when the left thought they could achieve gun control by going after cheap handguns.
Right.
Okay, they've abandoned that completely. Now they're on this whole assault weapons mantra, which is utter nonsense and made up terms and.
It is, and the thing about David Chipman was in the ATF back during the Waco siege.
Right.
And if you remember the Waco siege, there were 76 people, including 28 women and children, who died in that.
This was in the early 90s, 93, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can say what you will about the Branch Davidians. Yes, they were their own little cult.
Yeah, might have been violating some laws somewhere, I don't know.
It might have had some strange practices that we don't necessarily agree with, but then there are a lot of people that do.
Right.
But did they deserve to die in an inferno?
No.
I'd say no.
Absolutely not.
You know, that's a very tragic thing, regardless of what they were doing.
Yeah.
You know, and I've got a picture of Mr. Chipman, and I want to show you this picture because this essentially, to me, says all I need to know about this individual.
That's right.
So, Lee, if you'll put that up on the screen for me. All right, this is Mr. Chipman back in '93, standing in front of what's left of the Branch Davidian compound, where 76 people, including 28 children, were burned to death. He decides to take a trophy photo, just as a keepsake, you know.
To memorialize the event and his presence
memorialize his presence at the event. Yeah. Now, to me, that should be a disqualifier, the only one needed. That should disqualify him from that position.
Well, I've watched him speak, and actually, I think there's something.
Well,
I'll be honest with you, and I know this is probably controversial, but I mean, I watched him speak, and I've watched him in other modern contexts, and it looks to me like I expect an announcement any time that he's transitioning, that he's going to be called. He wants to be called Diane from now on. He's a very strange and unusual individual, and it feels exactly like he did when Bruce Jenner right before he did this. I don't like Chipman on about 10 different levels.
Yeah, there are definitely signs there.
There are. There's something wrong with that man.
There's something going on with that individual. But, you know, the Biden administration is very fond of putting people who are obviously somewhat mentally disturbed into key positions of authority. And if we look back at the Nazis, the socialists, the communists, they all did the same thing because those kinds of individuals, number one, they have a distorted perspective on morality, number one.
That's correct.
Number two, they're very easily controlled and manipulated because of their weaknesses or their mental issues.
Oftentimes they're just plain old perverted.
Yeah, exactly right. The Nazis were full of
absolutely. Well, the founder of the Nazi Party, which was not Adolf Hitler, was a man by the name of Ernst Röhm, was a pedophile and a homosexual. That's right.
Yeah, and you know, but the Democrats seem very fond of putting these people in positions of power.
One point I want to make: we were talking about not accepting the premise that the left puts forward often. Frankly, I think the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is one such premise. There's nothing in the Constitution that gives the federal government the authority to establish such an entity. And the fact that the ATF pretty much regulates through essentially statutory law, regulates firearms, that's a premise I don't care to accept. So the fact that he's heading it up, that's not as much my argument. While he is the worst type of person to be heading up the ATF, the mere existence of the ATF to me is an affront to the Constitution as well.
It absolutely is. I completely agree with you. And you know, the thing of it is, there are more and more people out there who are realizing this. More and more states are realizing this. You know, Texas just passed the Suppressor Freedom Act. Everyone's familiar with a suppressor. If you watch TV, they're silencers. But the reality is they don't silence a firearm. They simply suppress the report.
Right. Sufficient to shoot without wearing hearing protection.
Exactly. And in
there's
fact,
still plenty of noise.
Plenty of noise. In fact, if you go shooting in Finland, it's mandatory that you have a suppressor. You cannot shoot at a public range without a suppressor.
Very interesting.
It is interesting.
Of course, there's probably nobody outside in Finland.
Well, yeah. But anyway, the Texas Senate gave its final approval to the bill, which had already passed the Texas House. So now it goes to the governor. And if the governor signs it, that will be the first in the nation to say, we as a state do not have to abide by these statutory regulations that are essentially a violation of the Constitution.
Well, many states, in fact, have passed laws saying we will not, we are going to be Second Amendment sanctuary.
Yep. And they need to be. And you know, the thing of it is, what do sanctuary cities do?
Right, that's right. Same premise.
The Democrat administrations and sanctuary cities say, we're just not going to abide by those laws.
That's right.
So it's time that our side takes up that same strategy.
Right. The difference is that you can fully expect the federal government to attempt to enforce
absolutely. And the media. And the media.
Well,
the media will be on that.
Goes without saying.
Just in a heartbeat. Well, again, we're out of time, unfortunately.
It is.
We had more material. Always have more material than we can get on the air. But Some of them we'll save till next time, but we'll be back next Saturday for more America in Danger. I'm Robert Cressionnie.
I'm John Gatsis.
Have a good week, and don't forget Memorial Day.
Yes.
This is Nicholas Bellamy at Premier Equipment. I'm going to talk about the 4540 Mahindra. It's 38 horsepower, full-cylinder engine. The weight of this tractor is 4,000 pounds. This tractor is perfect for bush hogging, distance, small garden, a hunting club tractor. Comes with a 7-year warranty, 2-year bumper-to-bumper, additional 5-year on the powertrain. You can have this tractor for $200 a month, and we have 20 of these tractors in stock. Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
By Tharrington's Auto Works and Collision Center, your one-stop shop for complete auto repair. Rocky Mount Radiator, your cooling systems specialist since 1927.